We are blessed in this country with some terrific political cartoonists, and we have 3 of them with us today. Now, each of them see our important figures in public life a little differently, and let's give you an example. This, for example, is how Roy Peterson of the Vancouver Sun sees the incumbent Prime Minister. The caption, if you can read it there, what's the problem? The awarding this contract meets all the traditional Canadian standards, etc., etc. A bit of a dig at the Prime Minister for a controversial recent decision. This is how Blaine of the Hamilton Spectator views Mr. Mulrooney, the same man, on very much the same kind of subject. You can say, same Prime Minister, very differently portrayed, playing something called the Tory Monopoly game there. TerryMosher is also known as Aislin, also a one-name figure. He does his work for the Montreal Gazette and, of course, for independent publication, and that is his view of Prime Minister Brian Mulrooney. Terry, I looked at this last night, and maybe put the shot up again. I didn't quite get it. There's a man with a Band-Aid over his mouth.
Well, for the last couple of years, every time Mulrooney opens his mouth, bad things seem to happen. And so we're supposed to point to the wound and that sort of thing. Okay. Mind you, it's delightful. We suddenly have very good government in City Hall in Montreal, and the Quebec government's very quiet, so thank God this stuff is going on in Ottawa. Otherwise, I'd probably be out of business.
You guys, we were saying just before we began here, thrive on the fact that politicians do things that are, on the face of it, incredible and offend people incredibly, too, right?
Yeah, we live off the fact that they are human, and if they do something dumb, then we have the day's cartoon. That's usually how it works out.
We have got in this country something, I think, rather different than political cartooning elsewhere in the world, in that you guys operate independently. Blaine, maybe you could comment on that. An editorialist for a newspaper doesn't tell you what to do.
You get your own, you read the newspapers and you get your own idea, pick up a subject and get your own idea and take the idea into the editor to show it. They just check it for libel because they have to cover that eventually if anything happens. But you have a pretty free hand at editorial cartooning.
I don't think Terry and myself operate quite the same way. We do the drawing and then just take the drawing in, and if it appears in the paper the next day, then we know it's accepted. I think
meanwhile, if they dropped in one of Roy's cartoons instead of using mine, you know I got killed that day.
Day to day, you're sort of living in a perilous thing. You gentlemen, just meeting you, you all strike me as such individuals. Is a political cartoonist by nature a bit of a loner because of the kind of work you do, how you do it?
I think you are naturally, because you spend an awful lot of time at the drawing board. To do a cartoon, it can take anywhere from a couple of hours to 4 or 5 hours, sometimes 8 hours, if there's a lot of detail in it. And therefore, most of your day is spent at the board.
And yet you can zap in a way that editorials can't. And politicians live in fear. I think they live in fear of you guys, do they not?
Well, they tend to like our stuff when they get started. They tend to like our stuff that we do of other people. But when we draw them, they seem to think we sort of missed the point.
You're always waiting, of course, for great figures to come along in political life, and you feel that we're blessed right now with the current Prime Minister.
Yeah, but remember, too, though, that being a political cartoonist, you're sort of a populist in terms of the art you draw, and it's very necessary that you reflect sort of common attitudes about our politicians. You're not trying to point out a better way for them to do things. We don't pretend to be experts on government, but what we try and do is sort of reflect one popular attitude or another about a politician and how people are feeling about them. In Keith Davies' book recently, he wrote that any leader can survive anything but laughter, and I think that's our job. And we test them, in effect, we test the system in a way, you know, by how outrageous and how absurd we get with the cartoon, tests the system's ability to laugh at itself. Political cartooning is not big in El Salvador these days.
Indeed, yeah, so it's a sign of what we are. You call cartoonists, I believe, Terry, the hecklers of Canadian society. And let's see some of the heckling that's been done. Do a bit of show and tell here. And Roy, why don't we ask you to hold up, we've mentioned Mr. Mulrooney. We have another, a couple of other major political leaders in this country. Well, let's look at this and comment on it.
This is John Turner, and this was drawn when he parachuted into the Quadra riding in Vancouver. Unfortunately, he had a lot of excess baggage that he had to get rid of. He managed to do that, actually.